Okay, next part is we are going to attach the binding, so the bias and the embroidered panel. Okay, so this is the part that we've just done. That is one end of our pillowcase. This is the other end, and the first thing that I need to do is take off this selvage. So we're going to get rid of that. And then I'm also going to get rid of the selvage that I've got here on my embroidered panel. Okay, so what's going to happen is we are going to have the embroidered panel here, and between those two pieces we are going to have our bias. So the first thing that I want to do is just come through and measure and make sure I've got enough of that bias. Now, what I'm going to do, because again I want to do the French seam for this part as well, which means it's going to be these two pieces with wrong sides together, and then this on it as well. And the way that I generally do this is I want to get each layer done individually. So I'm going to pin this together. And remember, this is our wrong sides together, so make sure that that's how you're working. And then I'm going to come through and I'm going to add the piping onto that. Okay, so we've pinned our piping to the wrong side, and now we're going to come over to the machine and we're going to stitch that. And here's the machine, and what I want to do is just come through Now you can see here how far I've come off there. I really don't want to grab that into my seams. So I'm going to unpick a couple of stitches here. Which will then allow us to poke that all the way in. play twisty around. Okay. And then we come back to the workbench, and what we are going to do again is trim that. So again, taking a whole lot of that bulk out. And what I'm actually going to do on this one is I am going to grade the seam. And what that means, my goodness, look at the mess that I'm making there. So if I turn that over that way, I am going to come through and actually just trim away the bulk of the seam. So take away that first layer of the grey fabric there, which will make my seam less bulky. If I need to, I can do that with the second seam as well. Sometimes I like leaving a little bit there to give the seam some power and oomph. Okay, so I've trimmed that, and then I'm going to press so seam graded, and then I'm going to turn that out and press it. Because what we want in there is, oops-a-days, what we're wanting to do there is come along and then we are going to top stitch so that we are just left with our piping. Now, in this instance, my top stitching is actually then going to be a little bit off center. So, and you can see what I mean by that. What I mean is you can see the seam there. That's because we've got that piping in it. But it's also going to make sure that the piping is just in the perfect position. Because what you're going to be left with is just that tiny little hint of fabric. So once we've got that there, let's come back to the machine and And let's have a look at what we've got. So what we are left with, I'm very happy with. You can see that we've got that beautiful thin piece of piping there, and on the other side you cannot see any of those details. So that is exactly what I was after. Okay, so now we are going to put our pillowcase together. And the first thing we are going to do is, and again, wrong sides together. So I am folding up the side here and then laying that top flap over that. So the embroidery comes to about 1 centimetre off the edge there, and then we pop that side in, and we are going to put wrong sides together all the way down and pin or clip. And we're going to do that on both sides. And then we're going to come over to our machine and we are going to stitch those seams down. So make sure that everything is lined up where it should be, which is always the trick, isn't it? Now, a trick for when you're doing any sewing like this, instead of turning the project around and starting up the other end, flip the project over and make sure you are starting at that same side that you started on previously. What you will end up with is a better final stitch out. It's one of those things that like when you watch things like Project Runway or anything like that, they will be commenting on, you can see which way the stitches ran. And that's what we're all about when we're talking about pressing between doing rows of, like pressing after you've stitched a seam or anything. It just gives a flat, more perfect appearance. And back to the workbench. And as well as pressing, we want to come through and notch out or trim off our corners as well. So starting at this end, and just want to trim those, and then I want to trim the seam. Always make sure that you're holding everything when you do trim that seam so that you do not accidentally trim any of the main project. Okay, so that's that side done. Then we'll come through. Okay, so now let's come through and turn the entire project out. And we want to, when I say turn it out, we want to turn it so that it is right sides together. Okay, make sure those seams are square. Then got our top here. And again, we are going to come through and just roll those seams with your fingers until they're great. Otherwise, the other thing that you can do is come through, and if you press the seam out like that, when it then comes back, you will get a really nice fold. And Now, is there going to be a little bit of a bump where you've got your piping? Yes, there is. So you're going to stitch over that bump and try not to go too far on either side with that. And then the other tricky part will be when you've got the bulk of that embroidery as well. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now we're on the other side. Let's just come through and we will do what will be our final 2 rows of stitching. And last seam. And then when I pull it all back out, what we are left with is a beautifully finished product. Okay, loving how that is looking.